here today. Again, I'm Alex, the divorce planner. I am a divorce prep coach who specializes in helping people prepare in advance of a separation or divorce, helping you get organized, understand your financial realities now so you can anticipate the changes during divorce, and then make smart choices during the process. I'm thrilled to be talking today to Chicago-based divorce attorney and mediator, Kimberly A Cook. And I'm just going to kind of tee you up a little bit, if you don't mind, because I like to write things and I like to read them. So bear with me. For anybody who's joined us, if you have a question about divorce mediation or divorce prep, drop it in the comments. We have a couple of questions that I kind of want to ask Kimberly before we move forward. But as I see what you ask, I'm just going to jump to it. So bear with me. So as I mentioned, the highly accomplished Chicago-based family law attorney and mediator, Kimberly A Cook, is somebody who I'm excited to have a second conversation with. She's passionate about all things divorce and founded Grown Girl Divorce. I'll be tagging Grown Girl in this post once we're done. Her mission: empower Black women going through the divorce process, and share as much information with the world as possible. Kimberly has been featured in Black Enterprise, Business Insider, Thrive Global, and Chicago Lawyer Magazine, as well as recognized by Best Lawyers in America, Super Lawyers, and Top Attorneys in Illinois. I mean, I just kind of feel like you can't get much bigger than that.
I try, but you know what? It's about helping people through a very difficult time. And so the accolades are great, but you know what? I think it's really about seeing people through a process that is really the reason that people should be doing this space, and not to get kind of the pat on the back. So thank you, though.
I'm going to pat you on the back anyway, okay? You're doing both. Well, to that, I just kind of want to jump in and ask a really basic question. You know, these conversations that I have with different divorce professionals, I keep them on my IG library, but I also have them on my blog as well as my YouTube channel. So for anybody who's joining and has to hop in and out, you can watch or listen to the whole thing immediately when we're over. But I always like to start with the basic questions that I wanted answered when I was going through the process. So the first one is kind of like divorce 101, if you will. Kimberly, what is divorce mediation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's really what it is. It's a process where you are sitting with a mediator who's a neutral. So they are not a judge. Sometimes they are former judges. And they are helping you problem solve your parenting or your financial matters. The main difference between, say, litigation, which is that traditional go to court route, is that the mediator, right, isn't the decision maker for you. You're in control of the outcome. So you and your soon-to-be ex or your co-parent are really in the driver's seat. The mediator is there to help kind of facilitate the conversation, help you think through the problem-solving process, which is different from the judge, make kind of the decision. Right? So that's really the main difference.
Okay, so a mediator is a neutral third party. I just want to stress, right? And so what are the biggest differences between going the mediation route versus each person hires an attorney?
So there's two ways to think about this. With mediation, right, you can come in without an attorney. You can come in with an attorney, but let me start without, because a lot of people do that, right? And essentially what it is coming in and saying, here are the problems that we need to solve, right? But you have to think of it from a problem solving space. So it's not you and your co-parent against each other. It's you and your co-parent or you and your spouse together against whatever the problem is. And so in court or litigation, when you're working with lawyers, it's all about, this is my position, this is your position, and here are all the reasons to support mine or their position, and the judge makes a decision. In problem solving, it's here's the problem, and together the two of us have to figure out how to solve that based on the needs and interests of everybody together. So it's really, it can be very challenging because it's a different way of thinking. We are used to thinking in an adversarial space, which is, this is what I want, and here are all the reasons I should get what I want. Whereas problem solving is, here's the real problem, and let me think through all of the ways and all of the options that we can solve this problem. And sometimes that looks like getting a bit of what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like having to kind of bend and, you know, and compromise. So it can be challenging, but in the long run, it really is a great process for families.
I think you just nailed like the key word on the head, right? Compromise. And that is going into divorce. Look, the goal of divorce, at least in the eyes of the law, is equity, right? It's really about an split. And so there's a big difference between what you think is fair and what is equitable under the law.
Yeah, very true. And you know, the thing with the idea of fair is fair in many ways is subjective, right? And so as a neutral, my job is to say, yes, I hear you, but we could circle the wagons about why it's fair for you or why it's fair for your, you know, co-parent or ex-spouse. But to get down to the nuts and bolts of how does this work across the board so that it is fair for everybody. And that is sometimes hard for people to really kind of get and can be challenging, but I'll tell you, better it, you know, work through that than having a judge kind of make the decision where you have no control over what that outcome is. So that really, if you're looking for some sense of control, some sense of say in the outcome, the mediation is certainly an opportunity for you to try that out. I think it makes a world of difference for families.
Yes, I agree with you. I actually have a post on my blog, all of that walks through all the different divorce processes you can choose from. And just to kind of highlight a few of the differences between mediation versus the traditional person lawyers up and then, you know, kind of argues their point is the average cost of a divorce, according to U.S. News, this about 2 years ago, was $15,000 if you lawyer up. That is, you know, trying to really, I think it's the difference between being right and coming to an equitable decision, number one. And it's going to cost a lot more money. Number two, the cost of mediation in that same article was around between, depending on where you are, $5,000 was the average median. And that is a tremendous amount of savings, right? And that's just like more of a ballpark. You're giving somebody a retainer, and you can get that back if you come to a conclusion earlier. And I want to also circle back to what you said about the mediation process, that if you want to hire your own attorney to kind of consult on your behalf because a mediator is a neutral third party, you can do that if you're in that position. And actually, I've recommended clients who are in that position before.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean you have mediation, right?
No, that's right. That's right. And here's the thing. You want to check in your state because some states require and some mediators require that you do what's called attorney assisted. And so each party has their own lawyer through the process. But even when we think about kind of the cost overall, you're really not just talking about the financial cost, but you're also talking about the cost in time, because the actual court process does not go as fast as people hope it will. And so in mediation, you are sitting in and you're giving a targeted approach and targeted discussion to the topics before you. Whereas the traditional kind of court filing, again, I'll reference that as litigation. What that means is I file paperwork, the other side gets somewhere between 14 to 28 days to file a response. Then there's, you know, another court date set in the future, and you could look up and it's 3-6 months down the road on that same issue. Whereas mediation, it's we're here to address the schedule. I'll see you next Tuesday, and we sit down and we get to work. So it's really important, cost certainly financially, but also in time. And that makes a huge difference if you really want to move forward and get things resolved. It's a huge benefit for families.
Oh, all of that makes perfect sense, as well as the fact that the last thing you want to do is leave your future up to somebody else to decide, have it be outside, right? So if you're leaving it up to a judge, you have no ownership of the process, right? Versus and your voice is heard.
That's right. I think people lose sight of the fact that you lose 100% of control over your family or your finances when you go through the court process. And let me be clear, there are some cases that require that.
Yeah.
Some individuals can't, right, get to a resolution without having a judge say, this is how it's going to be. And that's okay. However, if you really can work to resolve issues, then you should certainly do it, because you do have more of a say. And the other thing to keep in mind, what we've seen is long term, those cases that went through mediation, that were able to collectively work together to resolve things, they have a much higher chance of staying true to those agreements because they had a say. Whereas oftentimes you go through the court process and you find yourself coming right back because one or the other feels slighted or upset, or, you know, is really struggling with whatever the outcome is. So really, if you're looking forward and you really want to say, you know, I really want to give this a good old college try, I really want to try to, it's not just for now, it's certainly for the future too. These things make a difference. They really do.
That is so interesting that statistically people who mediate tend to stick to the judgment more than people who go to court. I actually want to like jump in also, and for people who, and by the way, we've gotten a couple things dropped in. I am totally going to get to them. Please bear with us. I just wanted to ask how can somebody kind of prepare for a divorce mediation? What's the best way to do that? I mean, I know I'm kind of like setting you up. It's what my page is all about, but I'd love to hear it from a mediator.
Listen, it's all about planning an organization, right? No, but so here is absolutely, preparation is key. And so I think what happens many times, people get very overwhelmed by the idea of preparation. So I say all the time, start with the, what am I asking for? And here's the thing, that's harder than people think it is to really drill that down. So start with, what am I asking for? So if it deals with finances, right? So I'm asking for, say, the house. Then you think about, what are the things, what information do I need? What do I have? What don't I have in terms of information or documents? So you can then start really kind of pulling those things to really get a, you know, understanding of, okay, this ties into my ask, right? Same thing with on the parenting side, for example, it's, I want the kids, you know, 100% of the time. Okay, well, with that type of an ask, right, we then have to say, all right, here's what the schedule, but here's what I understand, here's the information, but here's the added piece to the, what my ask is. Now that we're thinking about problem solving, we now have to think about not just, I'm asking for this, here's all the reasons I should get this. The third piece of that is, okay, how does this work for everybody? So now you have to start organizing your thoughts on, what are options, what are compromise areas, because that's really what problem solving is about. But it's really important, as you start to prepare for the process, know exactly what you're asking for. And I know that a lot of people are like, well, that's kind of intuitive. You would be surprised. Come to me all the time, and, well, what are you asking for, right? And the response is, oh, I'm not sure, right? So know exactly what you're asking for, and then you can start pulling documents, getting organized, understanding the information that you have and you don't have, so that as you sit down for the session, you have a really good handle on how to then move forward in the negotiation process.
I mean, you're basically singing my song. This is all music to my ears. You know, it's my jam. I love it. And for anybody who's joined us, if you have no idea where to start, if this feels really daunting to you, please check my website. First and foremost, I have a freebie, 24 questions to ask a divorce attorney or a mediator. That kind of is like a jumping off point to get you thinking about, okay, well, these are great general questions, and it'll get you thinking about your specific questions as Kimberly is advising. But I also have like asset logs, so you can go through everything. And this is all the administrative stuff you're going to need to hand over, and it's going to help you assess, where are my priorities?
That's right.
I don't want to fight over a lumpy couch that I can replace, really. And also anticipate what your spouse is going to want, so that you are, you know, you know what you can let go of, as well as I also have a very detailed monthly budget calculator that'll help you assess what your actual monthly cost of living is. It walks you through everything. So please check out those tools. I just want to jump in really quickly and go through a couple of the comments that we've gotten. First of all, Shelby just said, this is so insightful, Shelby. I'm so glad. Paris, I'm going to go into what you wrote, but I'm not sure. My attorney and I have a mediation on August 3rd. Great. Let's see. I would pretty much be debt free if we do sell the marital property, and I would be in a better financial situation if I do sell. Okay. Well, I'm glad you shared that with us. I mean, I think knowing in advance, by the way, one of the biggest mistakes I see that I'm always counseling clients about is, why do you want to keep the family home, number one, and can you afford it? And let's go through and crunch the numbers, because the last thing you want to do is be saddled with an expense, a huge expense, like keeping the family home after divorce. And there are tax implications as well, and you don't want to get caught holding the bag. So I'm glad that you're sharing that you're kind of trying to figure that out. Thank you so much. And then Shelby also dropped in, what pre-work can we do before mediation to make that time productive and cost effective? You nailed it. I guess we're like simpatico. We just answered it. Again, get all of your ducks in a row, have all of your statements and documents organized, go through your assets, figure out what you want, what you don't want, where your priority is in the divorce process. If you have kids, Kimberly shared with us, start thinking about what that parenting split will look like, and also explain why it's beneficial. I loved that part of what you said.
You have to. I think, when you think about, because I know people kind of want the, here's, I go in and I give all of this. Keep in mind, your mediator is not your lawyer. And so you really are going to advocate for yourself, but you're in the problem solving space. So with these charts, with the forms, the great thing is now you're armed with information. And so you can very comfortably speak to here's the mortgage on the house. Here is, what the house value is. So this is why it would make sense for us to sell it. Or this is why it would make sense maybe for us to keep it. Or maybe we live in it for a time period and, nest. But having that information, but if you start out by kind of listing out what am I asking for, then take those charts and then you help build this is the information for me to really kind of answer those things. In terms of the house, I love what you're saying, Alex, which is, listen, I know leaving and thinking about uprooting kids is really hard for many families, but you really, really have to sit down and think about whether that makes the best financial sense for you, but also, are you tied to the home for emotional reasons? Because if you are, what happens oftentimes is once that ink is dry, now you're in a house that has old memories and it becomes very difficult to kind of look forward. And so I would be very, very careful about kind of staying in the space of we're going to keep the house or I need to keep the house, because keeping the house oftentimes means more, whether it's heartache, but also financially, it may not make the most sense for you. But write down, here's my ask, here's what I want, and here's the information that I and as a part of this ask. Those things are huge. Happy to hear somebody is going to mediation, though. That's great. Good luck.
Oh, we love that. We love that. Well, and I also want to kind of piggyback on something you said, which was with regard to the family home. And this applies to any asset you have. You can decide if you want to keep it. You can decide if you want to sell it. You can decide if, the two of you keep it. Everything is a negotiation and mediation, so you get to think outside of the box. And I think people don't realize that or forget it. It's like you think that there's a set template of what you're supposed to do. And that's another benefit to mediation. You get to make up what actually works best for you and your spouse, or your spouse and your family. Shelby dropped in, do mediation consultants provide a template or a defined list of the detailed topics? So like when you go in, do they say, okay, here's everything we're going to talk about?
So it just depends on your mediator. Some mediators will meet with each individual beforehand, and based on what you are discussing with them individually, they then, when they meet with everybody together, will say, okay, here are the areas that we know we have to assess. Here are the areas that we need to bridge the gap. Other mediators don't do that kind of first step process. So you all come in and their first kind of question, which we usually call a jump ball question, really is going to open up the floor. And for the most part, people have an idea of what their issues are. But here's what I would recommend. If you are preparing for mediation and the mediator has not kind of reached out to say, here are the topics we need to cover, then go ahead and have your own kind of checklist of topics, right? And put them into two buckets. The first bucket, of course, would be kind of what I call family matters, right? Family matters are things like a parenting schedule, decision-making, the holiday, travel, anything related to family, kids that's non-financial, okay? So you've got your family matters, and think about those topics. Then on the next kind of bucket list or topics, you have the financial matters. And financial matters are going to be things like property, asset allocation, debt, support. So that's spousal support, that's child support, college-related expenses. And it's easier when you break things out into those kind of buckets. And so then that way, you yourself, as you're writing out, here are my concerns, here are my questions, you can kind of start to formulate, is that a family matter? Is that a financial matter? And that's going to inform kind of the topic areas. Really an easy way to kind of pull together your topics if, in fact, the mediator hasn't already, or the judge, because some judges, depending on how you were referred to mediation, have already identified what topics to cover in mediation. Okay.
That is a game-changing golden nugget of just being able to, number one, again, you need to be your best advocate. It's okay to be proactive. Don't wait for anybody else. And number two, to break things up into those two different headings, right? The financial heading, family heading. Brilliant. Brilliant. I love it.
You gotta have a plan.
Have a plan, be prepared.
Yeah.
It's like, that's our jam. That's what we talk about all the time. So Shelby said she met with an attorney who insinuated mediation leaves greater room for loose structure that can be exploited in the future. In your experience, have you witnessed that?
So here's the thing about mediation. Mediation is confidential, and everybody has to understand the rules for mediation. Okay, so it really is what happens in mediation stays in mediation. And what that means is if you get a mediation and you guys are negotiating, you're going through the process, that's great. But if you don't reach an agreement, okay, then the law says that you can't then come to court and say, well, you offered X, Y, or Z, right? Because that undermines the transparency of the process, and it doesn't then otherwise support good faith participation. But what's really important is to know the mediator that you're working with, because in most cases, if you're working with the right mediator, then it won't be unstructured. It will follow a path and a plan. And so if you have the opportunity, meet with the mediator beforehand, do a consultation, ask questions that are really important to ask in meeting with a mediator. Sometimes you don't have the ability to meet with a mediator in advance. Maybe you were assigned, blindly, and that happens depending on your state and the case. And if you don't, that's okay, but know that mediation is non-binding. And so it's really key that if you know that yourself or the other person is not going to operate in good faith, then you're going to want to be prepared to then take the issue certainly to court. But as a general matter, most people who are coming to mediation really do want to try to resolve issues. In the long run, it works for everybody. But knowing who your mediator is can make a world of difference in that. It's
so true. And I talk about all the time, take your time picking your divorce mediator, your divorce team. Some people offer free consultations, and if you're prepared in advance, you can ask more with specificity, which is great. Ask before booking if they offer any kind of free consultation.
Yep.
Don't ask after you booked it, because you know what the answer is going to be.
Right.
Time is money. But also then kind of remember that choosing the right mediator is kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, you're going to really want to kind of suss out which is the right fit for you. Communication style, does it seem like something you're comfortable with? And then again, I have 24 question freebie on my Linktree link in my bio, 24 questions to ask a divorce attorney or mediator. It's a great starting point to get you thinking about what you want to be asking as you're taking these meetings. You actually brought up something connected to the next question that I had, which is, okay, during mediation, what happens if the parties aren't getting along? Like maybe you're, you know, whether it's just a normal kind of, they can't quite decide or agree on something, or even like a high conflict, or maybe one spouse is narcissistic. Like, I know that's a buzzword, but you know, it is out there. What happens in those cases?
Yeah, this is where having the right mediator is really important, because in those high conflict cases, or cases where there's narcissistic personality disorder, or whether or not there's some level of imbalance, the mediator's role is to level the playing field in some way, right? And so to get everybody balanced. So oftentimes what that looks like is not having everybody in the same space. And so you err on doing kind of a subtle approach. Okay, so it's all about, you know, recognizing that in order to sometimes get everybody balanced, you have to do, say, a shuttle method. So that's the mediator going from room to room. There are also times when it makes the most sense to require that it's attorney-assisted mediation, because in that regard, then now you've got kind of the extra level of advocacy on both sides. But here's what's really important to know. You can mediate even in high conflict cases. You can mediate with individuals who have certain personality issues. However, right, you have to make sure that there's truly been an assessment. And so I referenced earlier about, in most cases and in all of the cases that I work with, I do an individual meeting one-on-one, because it's during that time that I can assess, okay, what's the best structure, one, and two, are the individuals, so are the participants really coming to this process in good faith? And if they're not, then it's my job to then say to them, we are not yet ready to participate in mediation, or this is going to be attorney-assisted mediation. And so really, if you have a high conflict case, or if you are concerned about imbalance, talk to the mediator beforehand, let them know your concerns, and then they can then otherwise adjust. Because it can be done, but it has to be done in the right way. It has to be done in a safe way. But you want to take advantage of having that opportunity to speak with the mediator and just, you know, express here are my concerns, or here are things to just kind of be clued in on. And this person is a neutral. Your conversations with them are confidential, but this will allow them to then structure the process in the way that works best for everybody.
I love that answer. I love that answer. I had no idea that mediators will work with each spouse initially, not work with, but like take them aside initially and kind of do their own assessment of, okay, what is the tone, and what is the openness, and what are the personalities involved, and then set the template for what kind of mediation and what, you know, if you're ready to move forward. That's a game changer. That's a total game changer right there.
You have to think, you know, so speaking from personal experience, I'm the mediator, right? I don't know the individuals. I'm the neutral. And so essentially I'm walking into, you know, the proverbial lion's den. Well, I got to know, you know, at least something to help me help you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not about, let's take positions, or just, you know, my you know, soon to be ex is horrible and they hate me and they're going to say bad things. Okay, you know, that's maybe par for the course, but maybe it's more about me kind of seeing how you, when I ask you, you know, how do you best process? What are you really concerned about? You know, Can the two of you be in the same room or space together? And if so, you know, what are the clues for me as the mediator that you're struggling or that you're non-responsive? And generally, people are very honest. Someone will say, you know, I'm more of a low-key, reserved person. And, you know, my spouse is just, you know, kind of takes up the air in the room. And so then for me, then that allows me to structure the questions. That allows me to make sure that I am asking directly, you know, Alex, tell me what you think about this, because I've now been clued into, oh, I will shut down or I won't be responsive. And so really help the mediator help you by meeting with them and giving voice to, you know, just so you know, this is how I problem solve, or it's helpful for me to visualize charts, or it's, you know, I feel better if we took, you know, maybe a 5-minute breather. This is about a process that works for everybody, but the mediator doesn't know what your process and how to help you if you don't let them know. And that is especially true in high conflict cases. So it's really important to tell those things to the mediator.
Wow. I just love hearing about your process. I think it's incredibly insightful. Thank you. And by the way, anybody who's joined us or is listening at a later date, everything Kimberly just shared, that's what you want to ask potential mediators. How do you decide it's move forward and what our process will be? And she just gave you all of like the information to be listening for, because you don't want to say, well, I think you should do this. If they're not offering, that's not their automatic process. You really have to think long and hard. Is this the person that's going to do the, you know, be able to really be a facilitator of a successful mediation? Well, we're coming up. I mean, we have run, first of all, we navigated technical difficulties. Super proud of both of us, jumping from Facebook to IG, Meta, all the same. But thank you for being generous with your time. I just wanted to ask one last kind of wrap up. For anybody who's joining us late, I'm Alex, the divorce planner. Today, my guest is Chicago-based mediator Kimberly A Cook. This conversation will live on my Instagram page, and I'm going to put it on Facebook and YouTube. I'm going to tag Kimberly. She has shared so many great tips and insights into the mediation process that I highly recommend you circle back and listen to the whole thing. And with that, my last question would be, what do you wish your clients knew about the mediation process before starting?
Yeah, that's great. You know, here's what I wish that people knew: how powerful the process can be when it works well for their family. You know, and to really come in good faith, ready to roll up your sleeves and work, to really give it a good try, because it's hard. I think there are some misconceptions that it has to be kind of a kumbaya, or we already have to be, you know, very amicable couple in order for it to work. But I really, you know, participants who are coming to mediation and really want the alternative dispute resolution process, I think knowing going in, I really want to give it my all, it makes a world of difference. And so I think if you come into the process of mediation and you know, this is a problem that we can solve, and you tell yourself that we can do this, solve this problem, then up to finding a real solution, because problem solving can be done. It just requires people to really want to solve a problem. So that would be my biggest thing. I wish people knew the power of mediation. It can be done, the power of problem solving, but you have to say to yourself, this can be done. We can do this. And I'll just say, I tell my students, I teach family law mediation as well. You know, same thing. You know,
Kimberly, one more hat.
Well, you know, here's my thing with that. I think it's so important that people have good help, and you know, what better way than kind of having a training ground. But you know, dispute resolution, really it's great. Family, financial matters. And so I stress to my family law mediation students that it's really important for themselves as the mediators, but also for their participants in mediation, to say, we can solve this problem. Let's really try to work to do it, and you know, let the chips fall where they may. So yes, that's my tidbit on the,
I love it.
what people.
Well, and to that, by the way, divorce mediation, highly cost effective, much more humane,
Yes.
and much more control of the process. And the truth of the matter is, it's life, right? In life, you're always going to have to come, there are going to be issues, you have to come to resolution. So it's just another problem solving experience in your life. I want to remind anybody who's thinking about a divorce or a separation or going through the process, divorce is just a process. It doesn't define who you are, and you will get over to the other side, and before you know it, quite frankly.
Yes.
I wanted to acknowledge one last comment that I wanted to speak to from Paris, who said, my daughter and school district, I will be keeping that, you know, if I keep the house, the daughter and the school district are going to be where the property is. But if I do keep the marital house, I'll be house poor. The only other option is to rent. If I do sell, I want you to immediately go to my blog. There's a post that is 4 questions to ask yourself if you want to keep the family home that addresses this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to really crunch the numbers of your life, because the last thing you want to do is put yourself in debt immediately after a divorce. It's not worth it. So please go read that. It's going to really inform you. And I also have an interview with CDRE. That's a certified divorce real estate expert. Selena St. Clair, that's on my website. So watch both of those, because that's really going to help you make a smart and kind of financially prudent decision for yourself. And with that, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me.
Carol, thank you. It's great as always, and for the work that you do and the resources that you provide. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
You're awesome. I can't wait to do this again in the future. And thank you to everybody for bearing with us and jumping over here for our live today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see everyone, especially Kimberly, again soon.
Thank you.